Right, let's get on to today's main subject then. Lots of managers have been coming in recently. We've been discussing them on this pod. And one that we mentioned last week was Danny Cowley, who's arrived at Fratton Park. He comes off the back of what was, I guess, one of those mysterious departures at Huddersfield where he seemingly had done quite well, Mike. But we think it may have been, a disagreement behind the scenes rather than anything to do with football reasons, because he kept Huddersfield up, and not all fans had taken to him, but he was doing what he was asked to.
He did a brilliant job at Huddersfield. I think not just the fact that he kept them up. I think there was so much nuance, reading between the lines of what was going on behind the scenes and the way things had unravelled at the club following relegation from the Premier League. I think there were so many things he had to contend with. And I just think he did a fantastic job. And I think it was, even in the tense running, the post-lockdown conditions, I thought he handled everything absolutely brilliantly. But ultimately, I think the goalpost moved on him mid-season. January, they appointed Mark Devlin as the new CEO. And I think if you're a CEO coming in, you look at Danny Cowley and thinking, this guy's got everything handled. What am I here for? Kind of thing, And Danny Cowley's thinking, I want things a certain way, and I'm going to, approach the people above me and tell them what's needed at this football club, and put demands on them, not just on the players. And I think that probably was unsettling for a new CEO coming in who wants things done his own certain way. There's already this guy in place that is a very controlling figure and, is able to manage many different things at the same time and identify what needs sorting out in any given position. I think it just unsettled Devlin as soon as he came in. And the timing of the sacking of Danny Cowley, straight off the back of the 2-1 win over West Brom, West Brom chasing promotion. Huddersfield turned them over in a big 6-pointer right at the end of the season. Didn't even let him see the season out. It was just, it was like, right, you've done the job I needed you to do for me. Now we need to part ways because we need to, change things up. And I just think it was, Danny Cowley did an absolutely fantastic job. And it's kind of gone a little bit unrecognised. It was very recognised at the time because it was a harsh dismissal. But there was so much in the culture of that club coming down from the Premier League that Cowley had to contend with. And I think he did a fantastic job managing everything.
Yeah, there's a very interesting article on The Athletic this week, and it's mentioned on a couple of other podcasts as well, that the Huddersfield turnaround is going to take so long because it's such a change of ownership, mass turnover of players, got to get players off the wage bill as well. Danny Cowley came in, and this was not going to be a 2, 3, 4 month job, was it? This was going to be a longer term project. And I guess that's what Danny Cowley wants, but he was never really expected to do that at Huddersfield.
No, well, he came in and, the first 9 games of the season, they'd lost 7, the bottom of the table. They were in real trouble. And he didn't take long to get a handle on it and start putting standards up. This was a dressing room that kind of had a lot of foreign players that were brought in, a very specific recruitment strategy under the old regime, kind of buying players on the cheap and stuff like that. And a lot of gambles involved in some of the signings. And it needed someone to sort the wheat from the chaff and really understand what was going to be effective and what was going to be productive for the team in the Championship right now. And I think Cowley got to the bottom of that, really quickly. But as he said himself, I think you kind of have this bounce effect. You get the results that you want, but it's not sustainable because you've done it overnight, and you can't sustain overnight success. So he brought in the overnight success, but then he weathered the bad storm that was inevitably going to follow. Then you've got the COVID issues. I thought he managed that really well when he came back. Such a tough schedule, yet a squad that hadn't had the body of work pre-season that Danny Cowley would have put into them, for example. And all these factors came up, and I thought he managed the mental side really well, of keep looking after the mental state of his players, of rotating energy levels and making sure that they peaked for really important games. And that, certain other games, he was very good at conserving energy in certain matches that they weren't expected to win. So let's make sure this is a 0-0 type of game. Not much energy gets expended, and then we've got more for the quick turnaround. And all of these little logistics in terms of the mentality and energy of his players, I thought he managed it all brilliantly. It was like you could say there was 3-4 different stages of the season. And in the course of last season, Danny Cowley did 3 or 4 different jobs. It was like 3 or 4 different managers almost in the way he went about it. And I just thought it was phenomenal what he did.
Well, now he finds himself at Portsmouth. And you mentioned this last week, Mike, actually, when we touched upon all of the appointments across League One. You said that Danny Cowley would have waited for this opportunity because he won't have been short of offers during his break. He's done his token media duties, of course. He's been on highlight shows. And then he finds himself appointed at Portsmouth. And there is something that feels quite right about this, isn't there?
Yeah, I'd say it's a good fit. I'd say, you know, Portsmouth of the size of club is the good fit for Danny Cowley, the size of manager now, because I think Danny Cowley is a championship manager. I think he proved that enough last season. And I think we talk about some of these championship managers now that are having to come down to League One to find jobs and find, you know, jobs that they can see a long-term future in, that they can see the potential that they can go, you know, they can start off a solid base at a level that they're comfortable at, but then push to go higher without, you know, these demands being placed on them too quickly. Whereas some of these other managers at championship level have known quantities at that level. Danny Cowley's still in the state of like an unknown quantity. So there's potential for him to grow at championship level as well. So yeah, I think it's a good fit. I think he will, you know, he's all about the fans and I think he will use the fans as something that generates energy for the players. I think the game plan that he will put in place will suit a rocking Fratton Park. And I think that's something that he's buying into. He sees everything as tools. He sees people as tools. He sees people as resources. He will see the Fratton Park crowd as a massive resource in his favour that at other clubs he wouldn't get. He will see the owners, that the sensible owners, not necessarily splash the cash owners. You know, it's not, you know, we can have this misconception of Portsmouth right now as a massive budget club. I don't think they are. I think the big budget in terms of League One, I don't think they'll be going into the Championship and be, you know, expecting promotion top 6 in terms of budget at all. So, but he's good at managing resources and he's good, you know, so the size of the club is good for Cowley. He'll be able to use that, you know, that as a strength in itself and play into that. So I think it's a good fit on that level, yeah.
And sometimes in life, Mike, you just need something fresh, don't you? And maybe it's a new pair of shoes, maybe it's a new piece of furniture. And the Cowleys just appear to have given a lease of life to Portsmouth. So sometimes it's a managerial duo that you need just to breathe a bit of life into the place, because things did appear to be going stale under Kenny Jack. But what he has done, and although not too many Portsmouth fans will be sad to say goodbye to him, what Kenny Jackett has done is laid good foundations now for the Cowleys to kick on and take this club to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty we could talk about here that we touched upon in the Kenny Jackett interview early in the season, right at the very beginning of the podcast, in fact. And we were saying even back then that things had gone a bit stale or felt like they were going stale at Portsmouth, and this was a critical season for Jackett, and that it just hadn't really happened for him. But he is a big legacy manager. He does leave real solid foundations for someone to come in. I think what we've seen already with Danny Cowley is, in terms of, you know, we talk about freshness, is he's a very good communicator. He reveals everything about the way he manages and what he values in terms of his principles and stuff like that. And he shares all that information with the fans. So everybody really knows what's going on and can get on the same page with Danny Cowley. And it can be riveting listening. Sometimes he's really engaging and interesting to listen to. Whereas Kenny Jackett, you know, solid manager, but just kind of, you know, he goes through the motions in post-match interviews, doesn't really offer a lot of huge insight. He's just a wealth of experience. He'll give you his opinion, but there's not necessarily an awful lot of insight. And, you know, his interviews can be quite mundane in that sense. So you can understand now why Portsmouth fans are probably feeling quite galvanised by just listening to Danny Cowley speak. And you know, he's laying down a vision that like already they can begin to see a vision of what his team might look like in the future and how it might be different to Kenny Jackett. But I don't think it's a world away from the principles that Kenny Jackett's put in place and the values of that team, you know, in terms of the level of organisation of how they set up on the training ground and stuff like that. I think I think Danny Cowley will be building on Kenny Jackett with a load of forward-thinking new concepts that are laid on a lot of the same principles. So in that regard as well, it does look like a good fit.
Yeah, I saw a few journalists as well who worked with Kenny Jackett at Portsmouth saying they never really got to know him. They never knew anything outside about his life, anything outside of football, particularly. And, fine to be guarded and to keep your family separate from football. Of course, absolutely understand that. But what they were trying to make the point is that Danny Cowley has come in and he said, look, we've moved to the city. We're doing this, that, and the other. Like you say, it also delights fans as well, because they can really connect now with the management duo. They feel as though they've moved to Portsmouth. They're fully 100% behind it. And, everybody's in this together again, which was never really the feeling of the Jackett. But curiously, Mike, they're only contracted till the end of the season.
Yeah, that is a curious thing, because this is my only slight concern about all of this is the fact that, I don't understand why you would appoint it's a half measure for me. I would be confident enough in getting them nailed down as a future blueprint for the club. I think there's a slight danger here that the Cowleys impressed to such an extent between now and the end of the season, but maybe not get promotion, because it's asking a lot to just walk through the building and then suddenly, convert it into a promotion campaign with so few games remaining. And there's a potential risk here that, a big fish in the Championship might just have an eye on what's going on and come and poach Cowley in the summer. I think the risk is all with Portsmouth here, not with Danny Cowley, which, you tend to think it's the other way around in these scenarios, that the manager's got to prove himself. I think almost if Portsmouth don't get promoted, but Cowley does what Cowley's capable of between now and the end of the season, and maybe just misses out on unfortunate circumstances, Portsmouth have to be really, really careful that a more attractive proposition in terms of budget, in terms of what, immediate Championship football. It surprised me that they didn't commit to a longer term with the Cowleys, because I think the Cowleys have shown enough now in that what they did at Huddersfield last season and what they did at Lincoln prior, that they are more than adequate top six League One without a shadow of a doubt. But you've got a Championship manager on your hands, and a Championship manager whose future's already got tons of experience behind him, but his future is very much in front of him. It's still onwards and upwards, very much so, for the Cowleys.
And obviously this podcast will be entitled Danny Cowley, but we're using the plural because Danny Cowley has a right-hand man. It's his brother. They're very different personalities, aren't they, Mike? But they complement each other perfectly.
Yeah, I think Nicky Cowley's more of an introvert from what I can gather. You don't hear as much from him, you don't see as much from him. Danny Cowley says we're very much co-managers. I think Danny Cowley very much has the final say, but it's never a say that Nicky's not on board with, if you know what I mean. They're in constant communication. They live next door to each other. It's like brothers whose career paths have just been side by side every step of the way. I mean, you talk about a manager and assistant and the level of trust, and it seems like there's absolutely no separating them. And then you think that they are slightly different personalities. You're talking potentially like you've got one manager with two flow states. This is really powerful stuff if you've got two managers who see the world in a slightly different way, but I think they make decisions in the same way. They're both very logical in the same manner. I just think that maybe Danny Cowley's more of the visionary. Nicky Cowley, potentially, I can't say I've profiled him and done a deep dive on him, but I think he's possibly more of the steady pair of hands, possibly more like Kenny Jackett. So he might bridge the, what was and the foundational sense. And Danny Cowley's more the forward-thinking one. He's got his curriculum, as he calls it, of the way he wants the game to be played, but they work on it together. So it's almost a case of potentially Danny Cowley dragging Nicky along, faster than he would ordinarily go if he was a manager on his own, and potentially Nicky Cowley reining Danny Cowley in when he starts getting a bit too far ahead of himself and tries to push too hard too quickly sometimes. So I think it's that possible dynamic going on there. But yeah, if you can have an assistant and a manager almost as co-managers that are never going to fall out and go set, the the Peter Taylor, Brian Clough thing, when they're never going to be that fallout and go to separate ways. Yeah, I think it's a powerful thing that there's two brothers side by side working together like this.
Yeah, because I was thinking about a manager that we profiled just a couple of weeks ago in Paul Cook, who, may well still deliver promotion to Ipswich, but doesn't just seem quite the same force without Liam Richardson and a couple of other notable backroom staff. But as you say, Cowley's, they're not going to part. One's not going to be poached without the other. They come as a package, and that's what you get. And in terms of, I guess, sort of looking at on the day-to-day basis, Mike, you mentioned that Danny Cowley was trying to do everything at Huddersfield and had so much to be involved in. Well, I guess it helps if there's essentially two of you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can just cover more ground, can't you? I think Danny Cowley covers a lot of ground anyway. I think he's a manager that gets things done and doesn't, he looks for. I think his managerial style is, certainly when he first walks into a club, is to correct the single biggest thing that's wrong, and then move on to the next thing, but never move forward until that first thing is corrected. And then, and I think he manages in that manner. And, like I say, I think he can get through a lot of work very, very quickly. And having Nicky Cowley alongside him, who works to the same principles in terms of the way they make decisions and the way they evaluate and come to conclusions. Yeah, it's just two pairs of hands. And I think they'll have a very good understanding of, this is the sort of thing I deal with. This is the sort of thing that you deal with. We're talking, is it 14 years of management now, 600 and odd games together, from non-league, League Two, League One and Championship, at various different levels. There's a lot of perspective there in terms of, what's the right course of action in any given scenario. But in terms of understanding each other and what's a job for me, what's a job for you, there'd been none of that confusion. And the assistant manager is a very important role. I remember someone saying on a manager profiling, a hangout call that we did on Foxpunter, that, sometimes the assistant is the eyes for the manager when the manager's not around. And the assistant's got a really important job in making sure that the manager, everything is relayed to that manager and nothing gets missed and overlooked as what's going on behind the scenes. Some things can seem trivial and can be really, really important. And I think there's no danger of anything that Nicky Cowley might see that Danny doesn't, of Danny never coming to find out that information. And I think the assistant manager's role is hugely important. Yeah, and it's something I certainly want to study a lot deeper in the next stage of like profiling.
Well, look out for Foxpunter Assistant Manager Profiling coming soon to a podcast platform near you. One thing to sort of talk about is the fact that they've won 2 games now since they were appointed, a 2-1 victory over Shrewsbury on Saturday afternoon, and that's despite going down to 10 men in the second half. So the promotion push is very much back on track. Now, a lot of Pompey fans, I think, will be bracing themselves for the playoffs, the unpredictability, the pressure that comes with the playoffs. The Cowleys are good at these sorts of matches, aren't they?
Yes, they are. They are very good in knockout type situations because they're very outcome focused. It is very much about what's going to work in any given scenario. They're not going to play counter-attacking football against a team that they will find a tactical blueprint to suit the occasion. Like they say, from a tactical sense, they introduce concepts to the players, and it's kind of like a horses for courses approach in terms of big matches. Portsmouth have been in the playoffs for the past 2 seasons, and Cowley kind of mentioned it in his first interview. They haven't won a match. It's been 4 draws, is it, or 3 draws and a defeat? Either way, they need to win a playoff match. They need to go about things slightly differently than the way they've gone about them in previous seasons. And I think there just will be. Yeah, there will just be more of a knockout mentality about them this time around, I think, if they get there. So, I mean, we've said about the short contract, it's a danger, it's a risk. But I guess in terms of the motivation, they're all in on both sides. It is about trying to get up through the playoffs this season. There's, like Danny Cowley said in his first interview, there's that clarity. The good thing about a short contract is this clarity. There's no confusion about whether we want to get up this season or not. It is all in on trying to get up this season, because I think, whereas you look at Paul Cook at Ipswich, for example, Paul Cook's very much there for the future. And, already we've seen in Ipswich's early results and Paul Cook's early comments, they're not going all out. This is not a team that's going all out. Paul Cook's already got one eye on next season, I think we can safely say. And there might be slightly different sets of circumstances, but there's that clarity there with Portsmouth. So that is the positive side of the short-term deal, is that clarity's there and it's all in on promotion.
Yeah, and logistically, you mentioned that he was very good at conserving energy at Huddersfield as well in the run-in. Now, Portsmouth's schedule is not too bad compared to other sides in and around the top six, but they've still got a fair few matches to get through. The Easter period will be a busy one. And, with the playoffs just there in the distance, looking at them, Danny Cowley and Nicky Cowley will be probably quite good at making sure that the squad is fit and fresh for those games as well, because they have had a few injury problems already this season.
Yeah, I think Danny Cowley's a strategist, and first and foremost, and he's talked about we've got 12 games and we hope it's 15 games. And I think the decisions he will be making now, maybe not right now, but if Portsmouth cement a place in the top six and look like they're going to be good for the top six, every decision he makes with 5 games of the regular season to go will be with those 3 big games at the end of the season in mind. That might be in terms of conserving energy. That might be in terms of trying system. He'll already have one eye on who a potential semi-final opponent might be. There might even be a performance in there towards the end of the season where people might look and think, well, that was a bit odd. Why did we approach that game that way? And not realise that Danny Cowley's potentially already got eyes on the percentages of who likely semi-final opponents are in the playoffs. And we need to see what our team looks like in this system in case that scenario plays out, because that's the way we'd like to play. But if they're totally uncomfortable with it, well, we want to see what work we've got to do on the training ground if we are going to go with this system in the playoffs. There might be a little bit of that going on. He's very much a strategist, and it won't necessarily always be about the game right in front of you. He wants to learn every step of the way about his players and what they're capable of. So there could be a lot of these dynamics going into these regular league games, certainly at the very back end of the season if they're looking good for top six.
And finally, I think this is the shortest question I've ever asked on the podcast. Can they do it?
I think they can do it, absolutely, yes. Will they do it? I think it's too early to say. I think there's so many dynamics, there's so many potential. We don't even know who the automatic promotion teams are going to be yet. You look at if Sunderland are going great guns, Peterborough have got the best players in the division in terms of the attacking end of the pitch. Grant McCann's been in position for 2 seasons now, and he's very much of a similar mindset to Danny Cowley. So you think that time is a big advantage that he's had in place. So I think there's lots of variables. I think Danny Cowley can get them into the playoffs, absolutely. Can he win the playoffs? He did lose a playoff semi-final against Exeter a couple of years ago with Lincoln, but then on the back of that, and kind of came out of that playoff campaign saying, in all honesty, we weren't really ready. I don't believe, and there were signs in the build-up to the playoffs that, this wasn't an all-or-nothing season. The following season would be, and they won the title the following season with plenty to spare. And were really good value for it. So I think that's kind of what we're looking at with Portsmouth. I think it's a certain playoff campaign. If they get up, it's a bonus. If they don't, they'll be gunning for the title or top 2 next season without a shadow of a doubt.
If you'd like to use what you've heard about the Cowleys and any of the managers actually across the various podcasts, then Mike, there is a free case study about how to manage a profile.
Yeah, it's something I've been doing, applying to my betting since lockdown. It's been very successful. I've just been looking at the results up to the end of March. We're kind of 12 months down the line now, and it's like a 40% profit on overall profit on turnover since the over 600 bets. So it's been excellent, just being able to come at it new ways rather than data science is so saturated that market now, trying to measure team strength. So I put together a video case study that basically explains how manager profiling works and how to use it. So yeah, if you click on the link in the description, and you'll be able to get access.